Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Wine and Wildlife chat this evening. And I'm absolutely delighted to have Peter Apps as our guest this evening. Peter and I met in either 2009 or 2010. I can't quite remember when. We were on our way up to Botswana soon after the start of Painted Wolf Wines, and we went and did a little fundraising endeavor with the Botswana Predator Conservation Trust. And Peter is a senior researcher with the Botswana Conservation Trust, and he has been doing some groundbreaking and exceptionally interesting research over the last 15 or 17 years. His research is into BioBoundaries, and it has many applications. But I think the application that's seems to be in the forefront is alleviating conflict between people and predators. So I think we'll kick off with and ask you. I mean, with so many non-lethal ways to reduce livestock predation, there are already non-lethal ways to reduce livestock predation. Why do we need another one, Peter?
The simplest answer to that is that the lethal control continues. And that's a symptom that the non-lethal methods are not a particularly good fit to local circumstance. They're either too high tech, too expensive, too difficult to implement. And so the farmers fall back on the default, which is kill predators.
Can you just give us a little bit of an overview as to what typically might be the scenario that you come across up in Botswana?
It's the same as it is pretty well throughout Africa, and in fact throughout the world, in that predators kill livestock, which is a direct economic threat to rural livelihoods, and the farmers resort to lethal control partly because there's no viable alternative for the huge majority of them. It's the quickest and easiest way to protect their assets against the predators is to get rid of the predators.
Yes.
Which of course has been done. Now, people tend to scowl a bit at Africa and say, no, they should be living with the predators. What they forget is that predators have already been eliminated from nearly all of Europe and vast swathes of North America. They got rid of their predators in the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries.
Yes, I mean, you just have to see the hoo-ha that there is in Scotland about the possible reintroduction of grey wolves. And
oh yeah,
people going ballistic about
you see, that's a kind of condensed version of the urban-rural divide which permeates the whole world, in that the people who want the wolves back all live in cities where the wolves will never go. The people who live where the wolves will be are understandably reluctant to have them. And similarly with the lynxes. It is one of these classic things where it's the classic thing that the people who get the benefit are not the ones who carry the cost.
Yes. And of course, I mean, we live in a space in Africa where wildlife has economic benefits, and the resource is diminishing, and one really doesn't want predators to be persecuted. We want to keep as many predators as we possibly can.
Oh yeah, for sure. The predators that are inside the protected areas are a huge resource for tourism, which is a multi-billion rand industry.
Yes.
And those populations are, to an extent, although some areas are fenced, most of them are not, populations in the protected areas are actually threatened by the lethal control outside, because they tend to leak out through the borders, especially things like wild dogs, which have got huge home ranges. So even in the biggest of the conservation areas, nearly all the wild dog packs, their home ranges extend beyond the pencil line on the map, which says this area is protected.
Yes.
And every so often they will be in a livestock area, and even if they don't kill livestock, the farmer's reaction is that we do not want these things here. We'll poison them, shoot them. They get caught in snares accidentally as well, of course. Mainly for bushmeat poaching.
Yes. So I remember,
and killed on roads a lot.
Indeed, I mean, roadkills are a huge thing. So yeah. It's not wild dogs, but I mean, this is an illustration of what goes on. When I visited the Botswana Predator Conservation Camp's bush camp, on the way out, we passed out of the buffalo fence, and driving along the road over there was a beautiful young male lion with a collar around his neck, and a newly killed cow lying on the road, and her eyes were still sparkly in her head, and around in the bush around this scene that was going on, you could hear the ding dongs of the other cattle with their little bells walking around in the clumps of acacia. I mean, that is not an illustration. This lion was in community land with the community cattle, and I mean, so yeah. Anyway, Peter, what is a BioBoundary?
Okay, so in very broad strokes, we'll probably get into some nitty-gritty later, but in broad strokes, it is an artificial replication of the natural chemical signals that predators use to demarcate their home ranges. So terrestrial predators all scent mark to tell other members of their own species that an area is occupied and that they best stay out of it or from the occupier. And our twin strategy is to put artificial African wild dog territorial boundaries around protected areas to deter packs from leaving them, going into the livestock areas where they're in danger. And the complement to that is to use almost spot applications of olfactory deterrents, also based on chemical signals, to stop the predators that already live in the livestock areas from actually killing livestock, because then the farmers will have no motivation to go after the predators.
So why did you pick wild dogs and not lions or leopards or cheetah or spotted hyenas, for argument's sake?
Well, yeah, it's mainly because wild dogs are, of the southern African species, they are the most endangered. And also, they're the trickiest ones to conserve, because inside the protected areas, they're under huge pressure from lions and spotted hyenas. So they're not at high density anywhere.
Yes.
Even in the biggest of the conservation areas, wild dogs are naturally rare.
And I think even in areas where lions are scarce, the carrying capacity of wild dogs is I mean, the amount of area required is so much significantly larger than for other predators.
Yes, but that's mainly because wild dogs live in packs.
Yes.
So a pack will have a big territory, but there's 7 to a dozen to 20 or 30 wild dogs in that pack.
Yes.
And if you compare the home range, say, of 30 leopards, add them all together, that's about the same as one pack of wild dogs.
Right. Okay.
So the members of a pack are sharing that huge home range. It's not, and it doesn't belong to each individual dog. So if you kind of compare apples with apples, then actually wild dogs don't have home ranges that are much bigger than the equivalent number of other predators.
That is a very interesting piece of information, because that's not what is peddled as the standard truth by a lot of people here in South Africa, and I, for one, have also been peddling a misnomer.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's a slightly complicated in that, yes, wild dogs have huge home ranges, but it's because they're sharing them with all the other members of their pack.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you divide it up fairly, if you slice the pie, then the slices are the same size as they would be for, say, a spotted hyena.
Right.
I'm not a betting man, but I might even take a small bet at reasonable odds that if you did the calculation, you'd find that spotted hyenas per hyena have bigger home ranges than wild dogs per wild dog. Somebody can
so
somebody could check
there's
that.
A piece of math to be done.
Yeah, somebody could check that.
Right.
Because spotted hyenas cover huge distances.
I mean, there's bound to be somebody in the chat over here that has a view.
I can hear them. I can hear them tapping the keys on Excel as me.
Yeah, which kind of brings us into I think we should probably have some wine actually after, and so we can settle ourselves down before and get going with the crux of what's going on. So, have you got your wine, Peter?
I've got my wine, yes, and I took the precaution of loosening the cork.
Well, that's always a very good idea.
We don't get a busted cork or something embarrassing. So here we have.
All right,
just so you can see it's the right stuff.
Yeah. So the wine is called Lycaon, and actually the scientific name for an African wild dog is Lycaon pictus, and roughly translated it means Lycaon is a wolf or wolf-like, and pictus is painted. So that's where our name comes from. It is a source of debate amongst African wild dog conservationists as to what they should be called, but we're sticking with wild dogs because that's the official name as where we stand. So the wine that we've actually got in our bottle over here, and I don't know whether any or many of you have this wine. I know some of you do, but others of you that perhaps are drinking something else, perhaps you can just pop them on the feed and let us know what you're drinking if you're not drinking this wine. But it's some Chenin, and it's the Lycaon range of Chenin, Lycaon range of wines that we produce are all from certified single vineyards, very small blocks of vines, 0.5 hectare, 1 hectare. And this particular wine is from a vineyard in Wellington, and it's a wine that fits within South Africa's vine heritage scheme. And I kind of like the parallel between conserving the old vines and the old vineyards of South Africa and helping conserve Africa's fauna and Africa's wildlife heritage. There seems to be a little bit of a parallel in my mind. So the wine, well, what do you think? I'm going to ask you to tell us about the wine, Peter.
Okay. So I'm in at the deep end.
Indeed.
I will admit that when your very generous bottles arrived, I did a kind of cheap preview. So I've got some idea what's there, but this is my first sniff in about a week. Let's see.
Yeah, Peter's been sniffing wild dogs all week, so he's in a tough position.
Some of the things, if I detect any of those notes in a wine, you know there's something seriously wrong with it. So, okay, I'm getting. This is actually something I hadn't noticed before. It's not prominent, and it's not a strongly green. It's a very slightly unripe green fruit note, and I'm not as good at this as I used to be. There's a sort of a zesty ester kind of top note to it.
Do you find some sort of pear aromatics, or maybe baked apple aromatics?
Actually, I don't.
Okay.
I was thinking maybe what I find quite a lot when I taste white wines is that I get quince a lot.
Well, quince is one of the quince is definitely a banker for this wine. Yeah, absolutely. Very much so.
I am now. It's sort of sat a little bit. There's apple peel.
Yes.
But quite zesty. It isn't cooked apple, not at all. It is that first kind of, if you peel an apple, that first bit.
Yes, there is some skin contact in this one, and
that might be it.
That's
that might be the green
apple, where your apple peel is coming from.
So now I'm going to do something which I know I'm not supposed to do.
You are. You're absolutely supposed to do.
I've been to tasting. This is frowned on. People get, their mouths go like cat's bottoms. And not supposed to do that. No, but here we. Okay, so there's. It's a much kind of warmer or sweet estery, almost little. We get into the kind of stewed apple rather than the fresh apple skin.
I was thinking it smelled like
okay, that's sorry. Well, exactly, it's cooked apple, yes. Precisely. That is exactly what it is. And it really is, and there's, a sudden, not quite floral, but very, very fruity ester or ketone note.
Yes. So this vineyard is beautiful.
There's a lot going on in this stuff.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious one.
It's really complicated. Yeah.
So Peter, in his way back when life, actually did some research into some of the flavor components of grapes. Would you like to just touch on that a little bit before we actually move on to the pith of what we need to be dealing with?
Yes, this is years and years and years ago, back in the 1980s, when I was doing my doctorate at University of Pretoria in the chromatography institute there. And we got involved in some wine analysis. And it being so long ago, I don't remember the tiny fine details, but two things we were looking at was the cork taint, which at that time was still a problem under investigation. It's because the trichloroanisols, which we now know are causing it, have got such low flavor and odor thresholds that their concentration in effective wines was right at the limit of what the analytical instruments could do. And the other one from a bit later on, so actually after I left chromatography, there was of course the issue with the methoxypyrazines, which gave the classic grassy note in the Sauvignon Blancs, and which unscrupulous winemakers were adding in pure form to their wines in levels which were ridiculously high. Once again, because the winemakers couldn't convince themselves that one drop in a 100,000 litre tank was enough. So they'd be dumping in a whole milliliter.
So were you responsible for rumbling those cheats?
No, this was that was done at the there is an actual wine analysis laboratory at Stellenbosch yes. University, and they were really the kind of core of the wine flavor analysis in South Africa. So the problems all got referred to them. We had an associate researcher from Germany, and his background was in wine. And that was how we got into it in chromatography. But yeah, I mean, wine flavor, obviously, there's been huge investigations into what gives it, what's the good stuff, what causes the problems. I mean, things like cork taint, geosmin was another one. One gives an earthy off flavor, which in some varietals, a little bit of earthy is good, but you get a fraction too much and it's a real problem.
Yes.
And that's, once again, it's one of these compounds with an extremely low flavor threshold. Very, very difficult to do analytically.
So would you say that the work that you did way back when in the wine field was actually the beginning of the path that led you to doing the work that you're doing now?
It's the same analytical challenge, because you're looking at a very, very complicated mixture of different volatile chemicals. To analyze a bottle of wine, there are literally thousands of volatiles in there, and most of them are of only marginal relevance at best. which is similar to mammal odors. So mammal social odors are hugely complex, hundreds and hundreds of different components. And as with wine, there was that in the 80s, as the chemistry got more sophisticated and people realized, okay, we can identify dozens and dozens of these things. There were people who tried to make de novo artificial wine. So they said, okay, we'll start with water, we'll add ethanol, and then some of this and some of that, and they kept adding things. And they got something that was a rough approximation to dreadful old Blanc.
Yes.
That was about the best they could do, and then they gave up. Because it just didn't make any sense to try to replicate wine.
Yes.
It was way quicker and cheaper, just make wine.
To make it.
So if you want wine, let some grapes ferment. Simple. There's no need to do it by chemistry.
Yes.
Now, with the mammal chemical signals, we're a slightly different problem in that, yes, they're hugely complex. There is an orthodoxy which says that complexity is part of the signal. There is zero evidence to support that, and some reasonably strong evidence.
Can you just dive into that a little bit, because that sounds a bit complicated. Okay. If you can just explain what you mean by that, please.
Okay, so let's take a hypothetical mammal odor. So say dog urine. Any dog. That's got something like 400 different organic volatiles in it, which can be detected fairly straightforwardly with a gas chromatograph. And there are probably a whole, well, we know for sure, not probably, there's probably another 1,000 there, which are in tiny quantities and which we're not even seeing with our most sophisticated analyses. Now, the people who were working in mammal chemical communication back in the 1980s and 1990s especially, somehow convinced themselves that the complexity, so in other words, every compound had a role in the signal.
Yes.
There was no background there, no rubbish, nothing irrelevant. And that the only way to replicate the signal would be to do like the wine guys did, and put everything back in there.
Yeah.
Now, the practical problem with that is that's basically impossible. If the wine guys with all their resources couldn't do it, there's no way the mammal guys would be able to. And there was zero evidence, actually, when you examine what evidence was available, to support that view. And my suspicion is it was something, well, in fact, I know it was dreamed up by a chemist, an analytical chemist, who, of course, just loved identifying hundreds and hundreds of things. It didn't matter to him whether or not at the end it made any sense at all. So anyway, So this guy, he was an excellent analytical chemist. I mean, one of the top guys in the field. So he called it a chemical image, right? So like the picture on the wall behind you there, it all had to be there, otherwise it didn't make sense.
Right.
This was the chemical image, and the chemical image strategy, so-called, was that you just keep identifying things, which of course to a chemist is heaven on earth. Wonderful. We'll just identify stuff. We'll do spectrometry and chromatography and synthesis, and great.
Yeah.
The biologists are kind of sitting there saying, well, this is very interesting, but it doesn't tell us anything about the animal. Now, what also happened at the same time, or just a little bit later, was that benchtop GC mass spec. These are the analytical instruments we use to analyze the social odors of the mammals. So straightforward instruments became available at reasonable cost. I mean, they're still expensive, but they were available in labs. And biologists, rather than chemists, started to use them.
Right.
So the biologist would put the sample in, and it was a bit like CSI on the TV, where sample would go in, answer would come out kind of stuff. That's what they were expecting. They didn't get that. What they got is a whole string of so for peak number so-and-so, the area is this, the area of the peak is a measure of quantity. They got lots of that. Wonderful. What are we going to do with this? Multivariate statistics, which of course at that same time was becoming available on desktop PCs. So people were going crazy with statistics analysis. They were going crazy with these analyses run by non-chemists, and they put the two together, and the whole of mammal chemical signaling as an area of study stalled because people were asking the wrong questions and trying to answer them using the wrong tools.
It just sounded too complicated as well.
Well, yeah, they weren't. And it was partly because, okay, so the answer is complicated. We've got lots of data. If we put lots of data in to answer a complicated question using these multivariate statistics, the answer will float to the top. It didn't. Yes, and there's no actual reason to suppose that it would.
Yes.
And the whole field stalled. There's a PhD in sociology of science. And by this time, I'd actually moved out of mammal chemical communication into off flavors, taints, pesticide residues, which is once again similar challenge. Very, very complicated samples in which only a few of the components are actually relevant.
Yes.
So that set of skills, I then, when I got headhunted up to Botswana in 2007, 2008, I brought that background with me. And basically, the idea being that we replicate the chemical signal that says, keep away, keep out. This is an occupied area, don't come here. We're going to lie to the animals. We're going to bullshit them that there's a pack on the outside of this fence, or there's a big, tough resident leopard that lives here. Do not trespass. That's the whole idea behind, that's what a bioboundary is. But we can only do that if the signals are simple.
Yes. So
if they're as complicated, as the experts said they were, the whole project becomes impossible. Yes. And it cannot be impossible because we have to be able to do it in order to conserve these predators, because nothing else is working.
So in essence, having spent now 17 years working on this on this project, I mean it's been a massive project, and I know it's cost a great deal of money to do, and you've been blessed to have a very influential benefactor to help you. But having done that, you're able to, I imagine that you're able to take the essence of wild dog fear and supersize it. So
yeah, that's kind of what we're aiming at. Now for wild dogs, we're still at the stage of testing which components of their urine are they even vaguely interested in.
Right.
And I've got a very short list of 3 components that they're willing to sniff at. Wild dogs, adult wild dogs especially, are really unusual in that if you give them something strange to smell, especially if it's at one of their multi-pack marking sites, which was one of our hugely significant discoveries that we can maybe get back to, but never mind. So if you put strange odors at their marking sites, they're not interested. For all other mammals, if you expose them to a strange odor, they poke their nose in it. What is this? A whole bunch of them, like jackals, for instance, they'll pee on anything. Yes. Wild dogs, give them a strange odor, not interested, which in a way makes my life easier, because then if they show any interest at all, it's very likely that that component of their social odor is one of the socially significant ones. So I could screen the odors reasonably quickly. We put 3 different odors at the marking sites, monitor with camera traps, leave each one there for a month, so we've got a reasonable chance of getting more than one pack responding to each set of odors. And that's beginning to build up a list of single components, which of course is, according to the orthodoxy, is heresy. They shouldn't be responding to single components. Now, that's where we are with wild dogs. With leopards, we're a lot further along, because leopards have got a component in their urine which is a major component of tomcat urine, interestingly enough, called 3-mercaptose 3-methylbutanol, and it smells of cat pee. There are some wines.
It's in Sauvignon Blanc as well, I think, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I think there are some wines with teeny tiny amounts of this stuff in them.
Yes.
But it's kind of on the basis there's a little bit of everything everywhere. It's not of significance in wine. So, and this single component from leopard urine will, if you put it controlled release dispensers either side of gateways into ranches, say, or you hang it in controlled release dispensers around the
kraal.
Fence of a kraal.
Yeah.
Keeps leopards away.
Wow.
I've got camera trap videos of leopards walking up to a gateway, sniffing the 3M3MB, the abbreviation, and doing a U-turn and going away again.
Interesting.
Similarly, spotted hyenas will do the same thing with the same compound. And I'm guessing it's because it sends this super leopard message that there is a big, tough leopard you do not want to mess with. Do not go through this hole under the fence. We've got another compound, single compound from caracal urine. Now, caracals are a much bigger problem for small livestock than leopards are in both Botswana and South Africa, very especially in South Africa. Single compound from their urine will make caracals do U-turns at gateways and fence gaps. If you put it into a collar hung around a goat's neck, it will protect, say, one in 3 of the goats in a flock. It will protect all of the goats in the flock from caracal predation.
I mean, this is so game changing. This is quite extraordinary. I mean, just cycling back to what we were saying at the beginning. I mean, the pressure on predators in rural areas where predators are going into or kraals, or they're being accused of doing things that they perhaps haven't done, but something else has been done, and they're being persecuted on that basis. But to have a chemical lock that locks them out it's a huge game changer.
Yeah, the effect of the deterrent collars on the sheep is quite astonishing. It stops predation completely from one day to the next.
Wow.
I was amazed how well it worked. I thought, no, we'll get a reduction. We can keep the small farmer happy enough, because he was threatening. He said, no, I'm going to start putting poison out. I can't, because he was losing one goat a day, 800 pula, 1,000 rand a day for a guy who's, a small subsistence operator. He just cannot sustain those losses. So he told us straight, I'm going to start putting poison out. We said, no, give us a couple of days. So I put together a whole bunch of collars there. They're made from plastic water pipe. So they're very low cost, zero capital for the end user. Put together a bunch of these, took them out to his cattle post, put them on 1 in 3 of his goats. Goats went out. Now, previously, the goats would go out. Every time they came back, there'd be one missing.
Eek.
Next day, they all came back. Day after that, they all came back.
So I assume as well that if it's a powerful leopard scent, that those dreadful feral dogs that also are such a problem for livestock are also frightened by it.
Well, okay, nearly all of the cattle posts here have got livestock guarding dogs.
Yes. And
they're actually not bothered, which is good. I don't want the livestock guarding dogs bothered by the deterrents.
Yes.
So this guy with his caracal that was no longer there, 10 days after the caracal gave up, a leopard came along, killed 2 goats. We added the 3M3MB to the caracal deterrent in the same collars. Out went the goats again. No more leopard kills.
So Peter, where are these compounds synthesized?
I buy them from a chemical factory in China.
So they're
available off the shelf.
They manufacture them to your spec.
No, they're in their catalogue. They're off the shelf routine compounds.
How interesting.
And this is part of it, because if there's a hugely elaborate synthesis needs to be done,
Yes.
pushes the price up out of the range of the subsistence sector, and it makes it economically less attractive to the commercial sector.
Yes.
What we're looking at the moment is you're looking at, I'm trying to convert in my head from milliliters to micrograms and dollars and et cetera, but you're looking at tens of rands, South Africa, 20, 30 pula per collar and charge in Botswana, which is 50 American cents, less.
Goodness. Do these compounds...
And you put 10 of those, so you put 10 of those in a flock, that's $5.
Yes,
and
you're
you
protecting
save,
thousands of
if you only save one goat, that's 800 pula. They paid for themselves 4 times over.
Yes.
So the payback is nearly immediate,
yes.
which you also need for the subsistence sector. That guy's not kind of discounting his losses over a few years. Mm-hmm. He wants to see immediate results, and that's what the BioBoundary deterrents give him.
Do these compounds oxidize reasonably quickly, or do they have a long shelf life?
Well, then this is another interesting small diversion. If something's going to be a territorial signal, it must persist in the environment until the neighbours come along to sniff it.
Interesting.
So it can't be sensitive to oxygen or moisture or sunlight or heat or any of that stuff.
And that's how it works in nature normally too.
Yeah. So nature has designed it that way. Has to be stable. So what I'm aiming at with the collars and with the fixed dispensers on the fences, etc., is that each charge lasts about a month. The reason I don't want it lasting longer is that sooner or later the predators will habituate.
Yes.
So what I want is that it must be a kind of active decision to recharge. It mustn't just sit there for months and months, slowly losing efficiency because the predators are habituating. It needs to be an active thing that, okay, after a month, are we going to charge again? Or are we going to say, these goats are big enough, the caracal's not going to bother them anymore?
Yes.
I'll take the collars off and save them for next year when I've got to wean the goats again. So yeah, they have to be intrinsically stable, otherwise they would never be chemical signals in the first place for territorial signals.
Interesting. So we discussed carnivores. I mean, I remember, I don't know whether Tico was telling me this or whether it was you that was telling me way back when, but there was an idea that they might be able to be used for other territorial animals such as black rhinoceroses, or to help elephants migrate safely. There were several ideas that were being.
Yeah, the intriguing thing about the black rhinos was, you'll remember, how far are we going back? Into the 1980s? No, maybe not. Anyway, a while ago, big translocation of rhinos to Botswana. This is when they stocked the delta with Great Plains and wilderness. All the big tourism companies were all involved with the government. They shipped rhinos into the delta, kept them in bomas, and would do a boma acclimatization and then open the gate and the rhinos would go out. And the first generation of rhinos just bombshelled across the landscape.
Yes.
They just started moving and they kept going, both species. Now, what sticks in my head is a film I saw of a black rhino being released. And they opened the gate of the boma, and the black rhino, as black rhinos do, came charging out, snorting and carrying on, dust everywhere. And there was a big pile of rhino dung, probably about 30 meters from the gate. And it went shooting past this rhino dung, and you could see it put brakes on. When it hit the center of that dung, it just threw anchors, screeched to a halt in a huge cloud of dust, leaving furrows in the ground, turned around and went and sniffed the dung.
Right.
The second generation of rhinos that they released, because some of the rhinos are kind of settled, they didn't bombshell.
Yes.
because they found other rhinos. Okay, so rhinos live here, this is fine. And so our idea was at the time that, well, this is straightforward. And in fact, people kind of picked up on it anyway. Down in PE, Graham Curley and his group picked up on it, that the way you acclimatize rhinos to boma release is you collect their poo and you put it out in the veldt where you want them to live. And when they go out there, they say, oh, okay, I live here. Fine. Everybody's relaxed. What they also do is if they want to introduce new males into smallish reserves, which for black rhinos is usually a huge problem because the resident males just kill them.
Yes.
Huge mortalities, is they take that new male's dung and they begin to build him a territory.
Right.
They make artificial middens. Then they introduce him. And the guys who are there already say, oh, yeah, we know you. That's fine.
Interesting.
And everybody's peaceful.
Yes.
Now, you don't need chemistry for that. Why? Because you've got a ready supply of rhino poo.
Got it.
But we can't take a similar approach to landscape scale bioboundaries because we'd be stealing from Peter to pay Paul.
Yes.
We'd have to scalp all the scent marks from one wild dog pack in order to manipulate the behavior of another and disrupt the movements of the original.
Sorry, I remember you telling me as well that as you collected and moved poop, it picked up things like diesel fumes and other odors that made them.
Yeah, this was so. There was a PhD student who spent 4 or 5 years actually looking at scent marking in wild dogs. And this was a classical case of a biologist doing analysis that he didn't really understand. And of course, as with wine and everything else, the samples are extremely sensitive to contamination.
Yes.
Because you're looking at low levels. And somehow a whole bunch of our samples got contaminated with either diesel or petrol or something. So the interesting bits were just obscured by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of aliphatic hydrocarbons. Okay. So yeah, it's you have to treat the samples as if they were a valuable wine.
Indeed.
Pre-cleaned containers and everything's baked clean and rinsed with nice solvent before you do anything with it.
Yes. Yes.
Otherwise, you get a whole bunch of muck in there, which is nothing to do with anything.
Yes.
Just obscures.
And exactly what you do with your wine tanks, you wash it out with perhaps with caustic soda and then with some acid. Then you wash it out with clean water and make sure the pH is completely neutral inside there. So there's no way that there can be any chemical contaminant or something that changes the nature of the dung. Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. However, okay. But if you're just kind of translocating dung around, you don't actually have to be all that careful because plainly the animals are able to see the signal, smell the signal through the background.
Through the background noise.
It's for chemical analysis where you have to be insanely careful because the analytical instruments are completely stupid. So they don't know that that's a contaminant. They'll plonk a huge peak for that thing smack on top of the compound that you're trying to find that came from the wild dog or the leopard. So you have to be much more rigorous about cleanliness, the analytical samples, than you do about stuff that you're going to poke under something's nose to see if it's interesting.
Yes. Peter, you told me a very interesting story. It is a very interesting and true story the other day when we spoke. You've been in Nepal recently. Doing some work. Would you like to share some of that? Because I think that is fascinating.
Yeah, this is kind of hot off the press stuff. So we have a collaborative project with Cornell University Veterinary School, Dr. Martin Gilbert there. And we're working in Nepal, testing the reactions of Nepalese carnivores to the chemicals that we've tested on African ones to see whether they have the same effect. Now, of course, in Nepal, they've got tigers, which we don't have here, but they have leopards, which are the same species as we've got here, different subspecies. And they've got similar challenges in terms of conflict over livestock. But in addition to that, they've got a really terrible problem of large predators killing people. I was there for a little bit more than a month. 3 days before we went to the field area, a woman was killed and eaten by a tiger 10 kilometers away. While we were there, a child was killed and eaten by a leopard 10 kilometers in the other direction. I mean, this just doesn't happen in southern Africa. So on top of the livestock conflict, you've got this problem of people being killed. And so our aim was, this is now the first phase testing using the same screening setups as I use in Botswana. So controlled release dispensers on either side of animal tracks or jeep tracks through the jungle, monitored with camera traps. And with the various scents which we've tested so far here, the test being replicated in Nepal. And last week, I got WhatsApped a video of a Bengal tiger doing a U-turn when it smelled the leopard deterrent.
That is fabulous.
So, and I must admit that I watched that same video probably 10 times over in the day I got it. It is so beautiful, and it's in daylight. I mean, usually camera trapping videos are kind of grey and grainy, and this one is a big, stripy, orange and black Bengal tiger, a huge male. He walks up, he sniffs the one dispenser, kind of not quite convinced. He walks across to the other one, he sniffs it, and he turns around and goes back again.
Goodness.
Now I'm still waiting for the rest of the batch from that session, and that project runs until June when the monsoon starts, and we will have tested 10 components by then.
Yes.
And this is in what they call there the community forest. So these are they're managed forestry areas where the communities have access in order to use the natural resources. And there are unbelievably high numbers of leopards and tigers, even elephants and rhinos on the camera traps in these areas that are used by local people. So there's huge potential for conflict, and that's why we're interested in seeing whether or not BioBoundary deterrence can make some contribution to keeping livestock and people safe.
I mean, a huge area for conflict, but also a huge wildlife resource that actually needs to be protected, because I mean, I think there's many of those South Asian charismatic mammals are in such I mean, their status is they're so endangered.
Yes, but numbers of tigers are increasing.
Yes.
And that's kind of increasing their spatial range, and the tigers are also pushing the leopards further out from the protected areas.
Yes.
But what was very noticeable in Nepal is that we worked with these, in Nepal they're called citizen scientists. What they are is actually part-time professionals. If there's a big camera trapping study goes on, which they do for tiger censuses, etc., that is done by local people with the appropriate skills. So we worked with teams of these of local people on the ground there. And it is really encouraging how invested they are in conserving their natural resources.
Yes.
Because they realize and they articulate that, yeah, this stuff is worth income and money to us. This is livelihoods. This is actual tangible value. And if we could spread the benefits of wildlife tourism, trophy hunting, if you want to go that route, etc., to more of the people on the ground in Africa, I think we could inculcate a bit more of okay, this is my resource. I get my share of this. We need to conserve this.
I mean, that's
very noticeable. Grassroots investment in natural resource conservation.
Yes. I mean, one always runs a bit of a risk when you get into this thing because it's a somewhat political topic.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, Nepal, the land ownership and the colonial history or lack of colonial history has a bearing on the way that things are there.
Yes.
But I mean that campfire project that they have in Zimbabwe has worked reasonably well. I mean, it depends
Yes.
where it is in Zimbabwe, but in areas where it's still community run and the permits are owned and run by the community, that project sustains wildlife and works well. But anyway,
I think
moving
we
right
need
along.
to, we need to look at making wildlife more of an asset, less of a source of cost.
Yes.
And what the BioBoundary does is it reduces the costs of sharing space with wildlife by stopping the predators from killing livestock.
It's a huge thing.
It doesn't make any. Yeah.
Sorry, carry on, please.
It doesn't increase anybody's income, except when they sell their goats. But what it does is it cuts down those costs of sharing your space with the resource that somebody else is making money out of.
Yes, and you know, and the I think the other thing that about it that is so interesting, the science of it is obviously quite complex, but the application and the understanding is very straightforward, and it's something that you can explain to an unsophisticated person well, because they know about animal scent marking and what that does, and it's I mean, a lot of the ability to actually affect change and affect well, it's because it's also it's part of a change in human behavior as well, because people are going to have to actually take the step of setting up putting the collars on, setting up I can't remember what you call them, but
Dispensers.
setting them up. I mean, that's something that people are going to have to do, but
yes,
it's not difficult, and it's easy to understand. It's magnificent work.
I think you brought up an important point there, Jeremy, in that the implementation of BioBoundaries is very low tech. It's when we get it implemented at full commercial scale, it will be packaged in the same way as insect pheromones are for integrated pest management in commercial crop agriculture.
Yes.
Very, very easy to use. And my vision is that when the subsistence guy goes to the local agricultural store to buy his worm medicine or his tick grease or whatever, he buys himself 10 charges of caracal deterrent because he's got weaner goats he needs to release.
Yes.
And those 10 charges of caracal deterrent have been distributed by a local guy with a bucket.
Yes.
And he's distributed them from a small local packaging factory, which has bought 10 litres of this stuff from China and has got a heat sealer for plastic sachets.
Yes.
So the whole thing is embedded in the local economy.
Yeah.
Embedded in the local economy, it becomes completely independent of foreign money being thrown at foreign NGOs. So when there's a huge political disruption in the rest of the world, as we're seeing at the moment, with a whole bunch of NGO programs collapsing around our ears, the subsistence guy and the big commercial operator will still be using this stuff because it makes him money in the end.
Yes. I mean, it's
completely embedded, which will not happen with any of the other non-lethal alternatives, because either they're too high-tech, they need external expertise, or they need too much capital, which the subsistence sector just doesn't have, or their payback periods are way too long. So like for reinforced kraals, for instance, which the NGOs build on behalf of the farmers, their payback period is 7 years. These subsistence guys don't think in those terms. They want to see results in 7 days. And that's what the BioBoundary deterrents give them. They will then tell their neighbors, this is good stuff. Or if they don't tell their neighbors because they're not on good terms, their neighbors will notice, my goats are getting eaten, this guy's goats aren't. Why is that? He's got these things on him. Where did they come from? Well, somebody will tell him he bought them at the local co-op. And he'll go and buy his own. So it was we will get spontaneous uptake because they're a fit to local circumstance.
I think that, I mean, the work that you've done from a scientific perspective is groundbreaking and incredibly exciting. But the ability for it to have a practical, low cost, easily understandable application for unsophisticated people is perhaps its real win.
Yeah, it will. Well, and sophisticated people. The commercial sector will use it because it will increase their profits. And the conservation spin-off will be that there are now stable, sustainable populations of carnivores in livestock areas.
Yes.
Rather than this continual rapid turnover of jackals and caracals as there is in South Africa, with no leopards at all over huge swathes of the country.
Yeah, I mean the predator control that's exercised in the Karoo and in other farming areas in South Africa it's completely unsustainable. I mean, all that does is pander to people's bloodlust. I mean, it does not actually deal with the issue. The jackals still there's still plenty of jackals. There's still plenty of caracals. And I mean, it's just a mess. It actually needs a different solution. I mean, the interesting thing is that maybe those types of individuals for whom mass shooting is the solution, they might find your application to be more difficult to actually absorb.
Yes, I'm sure there are
culturally involved in this whole thing.
Yeah, there definitely are farmers for whom predators are the enemy, full stop, even if they're not causing a problem.
Yes.
And there will always be some of them.
Yes.
But as long as if we take away the economic motivation, which is predators eating livestock, from the majority of the farmers, why would they go to the trouble of hiring a guy to do calling and shooting at night, or employing somebody to run a trap line? Why would they bother? Now, it would be like employing somebody to pull out things that are not weeds. It just takes away that motivation, and slowly, with generational change, etc., this thing that a good farmer eradicates all predators will disappear.
Will change.
And certainly in Botswana, it's with the exception of very few individuals, the approach is, if these things don't eat my cows, I don't care whether they're here or not.
Yes.
And I'm not going to go to any effort at all to get rid of them as long as they're not causing me a problem.
Yes. Interesting. So we'll get into our last question. Peter very kindly sent me a list of questions to ask him, so I'm not quite as clever as to be able to have thought of all the stuff myself. We're living in some very interesting times politically, and a lot of funding for conservation over the years and for all kinds of social projects in Africa has come from the United States, and some of it from government funding. And I mean, it's put many of us in, or many of the research projects in a very vulnerable position. What's your kind of thoughts and take on that?
Well, to an extent, the timing is quite good, because it shows that we have to have solutions which are robust to external shocks.
Yes.
That it is no good constructing something which depends on huge inputs of foreign money, because that foreign money might go away literally from one day to the next. The stroke of a pen, there's no more money for this. And from that point of view, if it had to happen, for it to happen now, for me, is good timing. It shows that the BioBoundary There's zero capital cost to end users. There's no need for continual input from foreign NGOs. The low running costs, short payback times, huge profit margins over the investment in follows or whatnot. It shows that's the right approach, because once it's up and going, the BioBoundary deterrence will be self-sustaining within African economies and economies everywhere.
Yes.
Okay, this BioBoundaries can work for territorial predators all over the world. So jaguars in South America, cougars in North America, wolves in North America, wolves in Europe. There are at least 4 different trials of deterrent collars for wolves going on in Europe at the moment.
Is it in Portugal? Are they doing it in Portugal?
They're doing it that I know of in Greece, Italy, France, and Switzerland.
Right. Okay.
Now, it can't surely be coincidence that every single one of those projects started after I released my first results from collars on livestock in Botswana, and that 3 out of the 4 people are run by organizations whose personnel have had personal contact with the BioBoundary.
So isn't it nice to know that Botswana,
the rest of the world is playing catch up.
I was going to say, isn't it nice to know that some real important hard science has come out of Botswana?
Well, but what it shows is that, okay, guys, you think you're the experts. Yeah. Well, they're playing catch up now. And I haven't yet, these trials with the sheep in Europe, they've been running now, the longer running ones of them, for 2 years.
Yes.
And I haven't yet seen a press release which is trumpeting, we can stop wolf predation. But I can stop caracal predation. I can stop leopard predation.
Yes.
Using single components, from which the reason I keep harping on single components is that if it's single components or simple mixtures, it's cheap and easy to make. It makes the whole thing viable.
Yes. Yes.
If it's hugely complex mixtures, which is what the orthodox experts said it would have to be, the whole thing becomes impossible. So single components, simple mixtures, and that makes it into a tool that people can use.
Interesting.
Which is what we've got.
Interesting. Well, Peter has been nominated as a finalist for the Wilderness Impact Challenge, which I looked it up. The 4 finalists are all, it's very science-oriented conservation ideas and projects. And I hope that you will win, because your project is the one that has the most practical application, and I wish you, I mean, all the good fortune in the world for that.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I must admit, my nerves are starting to get a bit frayed.
Yes.
I think the announcement is on Monday, or maybe Tuesday.
Yes.
So yeah, it's going to be, the weekend is going to be slightly tense. But yeah, the Wilderness Impact Challenge was specifically searching for projects which are innovative, and the BioBoundary certainly is. It is doing something which nobody has ever done before anywhere in the world, and coming up with positive results. So yeah, I'm hopeful, quietly hopeful, but I've also got fingers and toes crossed.
Yes.
Yeah, let's see. You'll know. I think the announcement is on Monday, but
I'll be watching out for it. I mean, there are lots of really cool, nerdy, scientific conservation projects with some very kind of sexy applications going on, but I mean, yours is real. It's and it's tried and tested, and it works. And
It does, yeah. And we need to expand. So the award will allow that expansion. I need to build a team around me who can handle the different aspects of the project.
yes,
So that I can get back into the lab more than I do, bit more on the top end of the field work than I am at the moment.
yes,
So
yes,
yeah, I'm always looking for resources and people to work on stuff. There have been students in Etosha. There's been a project there testing the leopard deterrent on fence gaps. Similar thing in Kenya. Those results I'm still waiting for the students to analyze. There's the project in Nepal. So it's starting to slowly grow.
good.
But we need to pick up a bit of momentum here.
Yes, yes,
Because we now know, especially for the caracal deterrent, this is a thing which is a tiny fraction away from large-scale rollout. It definitely does work very well, but it needs the business aspects of it. Need a business person to run them. I'm a researcher.
yes,
I'm hopeless at business. If I was
yes.
any good at business, I'd be a businessman.
Well, I'm a
Then I'd be
winemaker and terrible
then
at
I'd have
business too.
then I'd have millions of dollars to give to research projects. As it is, because I'm no good at business, I'm asking the businessmen for the support. So yeah, that award would make a huge difference, and the publicity can't do any
Yes,
harm either.
yes,
It gets the message out there that this is something going on in Africa, which is leading the world in the first place, but actually solves a real concrete problem on the ground.
yes. I mean, it's going back to some of the things that Tabo and Becky were saying, the African Genesis, African Renaissance. I mean, what you're doing is, a very wonderful and important scientific innovation that's born from actually a little town, a little dusty town, rather well known for donkeys in the north of Botswana.
Yeah, but it draws on high-tech instrumentation from various places in the world. It draws on expertise which I have developed, starting off University of Oxford, University of Pretoria, various institutions in South Africa, up here, bringing that with me, putting it together. There was a Nobel Prize winner, Peter Medawar, from the 1960s, 1970s. And he said, one of the most important things in science is not only but to have something important to be clever about.
Right.
And for sure, conserving big predators in a way which is compatible with rural prosperity, that's the something important.
It's huge, Peter. It really is, because you can't expect people to suck up
No.
the economic cost of predators, but if a workable and really sustainable way of finding peace in the valley can be found, and it's huge.
Yeah, and with worldwide application as well.
Yes.
Everywhere there are predators, and quite possibly some herbivores.
Yes.
They might also be
well,
accessible to.
Yeah. So if we can work with elephants in some way, there's this rather extraordinary court case in UK at the moment with with elephants from Kusunga National Park in Malawi, translocated elephants then going
with
into
no fence.
Yeah.
With no fence. Yeah. Well, as a spin-off of the kind of formal BioBoundary, which uses chemical signals from the same species, we found almost by one of these serendipitous things where if you're paying attention, you can follow it up, is that there's some plant odors which are very, very potent elephant repellents.
Interesting.
So there's a whole nother avenue there which needs support and resources.
Yes.
It
yes.
literally, there is one plant odor whose name I'm not going to give you, which literally stops elephants in their tracks when they are walking from food to water.
Yes.
There's a video on YouTube. Look up elephant BioBoundary.
Mm.
You'll see the video. It is quite astonishing, but as a manifestation of this huge conservatism which is in conservation. People don't try new stuff.
Yes.
Elephants is in a rut of chilies and bees, chilies and bees, chilies and bees, electric fences.
Yeah.
And nobody's thinking outside that box. Well, we've got the videos that say there is life outside chilies and bees. Yes. Somebody needs to be putting resources into this.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm actually looking for collaborators for that, because I've got more than enough to do with the predators.
I'm sure.
So
yes.
if there's any elephant people out there who are drinking wine with us this evening, give me a call. I need some help with the elephants.
Interesting. Great. Well, I think we've covered lots and lots of ground. I hope you've enjoyed your wine.
It was, yes, very, very pleasant.
It's actually,
and
really
the other interest, when I did my sneak preview tasting, what I noticed is that it's dangerously easy to drink a lot of it. With many wines, you have one glass. The first glass is fine. The second glass is okay. By the third glass is not really enjoying this anymore. I think with my sneak peek, I drank 4 glasses straight off.
Jolly good. Well, you probably had a difficult
so
day
that was,
beforehand.
Yeah. Fortunately, it was at the weekend.
Right.
So yeah, it is a very, very drinkable,
yes,
and not in the quaffable sense. It's not. It isn't student wine by any stretch. It's very good stuff. Yeah, and thank you for donating the tasting bottles.
It's a pleasure. It needs what it needs.
And also, of course, for Painted Wolf's support of Wild Entrust through the years, even before it was Wild Entrust. I hadn't realized actually that the BioBoundary and Painted Wolf wines share a birth date.
Yeah, we do pretty much.
2007, 2008 was when both became realities.
Yes, indeed.
So we've got a stake in each other's survival now,
and
we're getting to the point. Another few years we'll be old enough to vote.
For whom though?
Well, let's hope we don't get called up.
Right. Well, nobody want me to in their armed forces anyway.
Yeah, probably not.
Right.
Yeah, it's been great chatting, Jeremy.
Thank you, Peter. It's
hugely interesting stuff.
It's a fascinating. I mean, it's lovely to have you join us, and I'm enchanted by what you have said. I mean, it's just so interesting, and it's such a game changer, and it's really, really exciting. I mean, it's charged me up to go and tell lots and lots of stories to people that I'm applying wine to.
Great, excellent. Yeah, you tell the stories. Yeah,
indeed.
The word needs to be out there that there is this work and needs support.
Yes, I mean, it was actually part of because there's lots of wild dog stories that come packaged in with what we do, and I interact with several people who are doing different things, and I mean, after visiting you all those years ago, I was really enthralled by what you were doing, and your story, albeit with my interpretation, which was probably slightly wrong, formed a part of the narrative of what I presented when I talked to people about wine and about wild dogs and conservation. But it sort of slips off the radar screen after a while, because other things kind of came up and popped into my space. But yeah, I'm so thankful. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been really great.
My pleasure. Yeah, and as you will have heard, I can wax eloquent for hours at a time on this. There's a whole story about the biology of the scent marking in wild dogs.
Yes,
is that when we first met, there was a huge gap in our knowledge. Nobody knew that wild dogs had multi-pack marking sites. It just never been recognized. And then in 2015, one of our field workers spotted a bunch of wild dogs scent marking where about a month before she'd seen another group scent marking.
yes.
And it was at a distinctive road junction, which is probably why she recognized it. And also she'd had a flat tire there the time before. So it was kind of
fortuitous
ingrained in her consciousness.
Yes.
But before that, and when you think of all the number of researchers that have been out there in 8 different countries for how many years, and nobody spotted this. And it's the critical part of wild dog scent marking that we needed to know in order to make sense of anything that was going on.
And it was a serendipitous
so we kind of
observation.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of, they say you have to play your luck when you get it.
Indeed.
It needs skilled, well-trained field workers to be keeping proper records, because then, she went back and she checked the GPS locations, looked on Google Earth, where's this junction? Okay, this is surely significant.
Yes.
And it turns out that yes, it is. And now we've got huge quantities of data from camera trapping from these shared marking sites.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of fascinating stuff goes on there. They are rendezvous points for dogs that have lost their packs. They will go to a shared scent marking site and stand there who calling until their pack comes to find them. They are where dispersers who are coming in looking for prospective mates, they will come to the pack, multi-pack marking sites and kind of check the Tinder profiles.
It's like a disco for dogs.
And leave, well, pretty much, yeah. Except that nobody's there at the same time. So it is more like Tinder. The potential mates in the pack have left their Tinder profiles at the marking sites. And the opposite sex dispersers come in and they kind of swipe right or whatever it is. I don't do Tinder, I should stress. They swipe right by leaving their own scent mark over the top.
Right.
And when that pack comes back again, there's, okay, somebody swiped right on my profile. Somebody looking for somebody who fits me, young, sexy female, 2 years old, no ties to pack, blah, looking for husky male, so on and so on, or vice versa.
Like that one behind me.
And so, well, exactly. So, and that is how the dispersers find their prospective mates, by going to the marking sites. Now, the way they find the marking sites, they're not sniffing the wind and tracking them down from kilometers away. The marking sites are on roads.
Yes.
And at junctions. So the dispersers go along the roads to find the marking sites. So everything, suddenly a whole bunch of stuff which before didn't make sense starts to make sense. Like we did a big experiment in Thule Block. Actually, before I was in Botswana, it was predated the setup of the BioBoundary lab, etc., with the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation grant. And so the guys in our main field study area, they just collected wild dog pee and poo willy-nilly. When wild dog pooed or peed, those guys were there almost before it hit the ground. They had dozens and dozens and dozens of these things. They took them to Thule Block, where there was a pack to be reintroduced, and they put a big arc of these things around the reintroduction site, which was on the Limpopo River.
In Mashatu.
So this was the original concept of the BioBoundary line of art of scent. And there were some places on this arc of scent marks that they put out where the introduced pack would hit a scent mark and bounce off.
Yes.
So they go back where they came. There were other spots where they just walked through it as if there was literally nothing there at all. Now, of course, what had happened is, because nobody knew there was such a thing as a marking site when those marks were collected in Okavango, is that they were a mixture of marking site marks, which are actual scent marks with all the messages in, and resting site and random poo and pee from who knows where, which don't have the messages.
Interesting.
So they bounce off the genuine ones and walk straight past the ones which were just.
So I mean, it makes total sense. So
Yes.
when you know, a normal bowel movement and a scenting
absolutely
movement are different things, and they send out a different message.
Yeah, and also one very powerful technique you've got for working out which materials are carrying which messages is you move them around and present them to dogs. So the very first one I did, I had some urine from whichever pack it was. And the way we did it in those days is we'd locate a pack using the VHF tracking that was walking nicely along a road. We'd get in front of them with a Land Rover, dump the scent mark, drive a bit further, get the video camera out. And so I did that. And the pack ran along till it got next to this scent mark, and it was as if somebody had jerked on a string on a collar on the lead dog. His head just snapped around as it hit the scent. And there was a huge, what on earth is this in our territory? What will overmark this? There's all kinds of serial overmarking between the dominants. Subordinates were interested. Fantastic. So it was the very first one I ever did. I thought, we've cracked this. This is going to be easy. We never, ever got another reaction like that. Right. Not once.
So
and why? Because, my suspicion is that mark had been collected all unbeknownst to us from a hotspot marking site. And it had quite possibly been put somewhere of significance to that pack, all once again, all unbeknownst. And they went completely berserk over it. Fantastic reactions. But never again. And we got all kinds of really erratic, random reactions to what we didn't realize at the time.
Must be so difficult to pick it all apart. I mean, because you get absolutely excited about getting a very positive result, and then you have 2 years where you're seemingly doing the same thing and nothing happens.
Nothing's working, and it doesn't. We looked at location where the mark came from, location in the subject pack's home range. None of it made any sense because this was pre-2015. Yes. In 2015, we more or less pressed reset on the project because, this is what's happening. Even with the chemical analysis, I was at one stage looking at, I wanted to look at short-term variations in the chemistry of urine. Yes. So from single dogs. So the guys were, because they were following the dogs in any case for other projects, it was reasonably easy to get urine from 2, 3, 4 day intervals from single individuals. And I would see huge variation from day to day. I mean, massive, both in total concentration and individual components would vary in abundance massively, 10 or 100 times, which is a puzzle. I mean, why is this happening? Of course, what was happening, which we only recognize in hindsight, is that I wasn't looking at day-to-day variation. I was looking at place-to-place variation. At some of those marks were at marking sites, which we knew had no clue existed, and others on a different day were just random. I feel like a pea now.
It's very interesting.
So huge amounts of stuff. There are all kinds of chemical results I've got, which are very, very intriguing. Like you'd expect. So if I analyze male urine, it's got these things in it. Analyze female urine, it's got these things in it. If a male wild dog, dominant male, overmarks his mate, dominant female, you'd expect that the composition of the overmark would be the sum total of male urine, female urine.
Yes.
But it's not. It's got things missing. And what that means is not only that, well, it means that a urine which is destined to be overmarked has got things which are not in urine which is not destined to be overmarked. And this is a replicable result which I need to get back to.
Interesting.
And look again with more samples from more known dogs. And once again, it was before we knew about marking sites. So there might be something going on.
So I expect when a dog smells the appropriate mark and it has the appropriate pheromone in it, it triggers a response in its brain, and it sends a message, and it sends out a pheromone, and then that's what they apply. And it's not just urine; it's urine plus.
Or conversely, if say the female's urine is lacking a particular component, then it gets overmarked.
Yes.
It's always a tendency to think is a signal is something that is there. Could equally well be that the signal is an absence of something.
Yes. So,
I mean, there's just so much.
You have huge expertise in African wild dogs, which are complicated animals, socially complicated, or factory complicated animals.
Yeah.
But I assume that so many other species of mammals have more or less the same or a similar set of responses and changes in scent, etc.
Yeah, well, difficult to say because there's been so little work done. There's been a lot of work done on lab mice, a bit less on lab rats, some work on ferrets, which are a model carnivore, very, very little on wild carnivores of any type. I mean, for instance, there's never been a detailed study of scent marking in lions.
Which is extraordinary.
Can you believe?
Which you would imagine that would be the first choice.
Surely, guys, somebody is interested in this. Seems not. And I think part of the problem is because there's this involvement of the analytical chemistry, the biologists tend to fight a bit shy. And also, it doesn't lend itself all that well to this big data number crunching approach, which is the default now in wildlife biology. It needs an unfashionably high degree of interpretation and critical thinking, rather than just collect a whole bunch of data and throw it into a statistical model and see what comes out. But yeah, I mean, spotted hyenas has been a fair bit in East Africa, nearly exclusively. Brown hyenas, Gus Mills, and in that kind of his heyday of field work, he did a lot of work with Martin Gorman, who was one of the kind of founding fathers of chemical communication studies. But lions, no. Leopards, yes, we had one study in our area, but we need to know a lot more in order to
it's extraordinary. You
build the foundation and the floor slab.
Yeah. You would have thought every single element of lion research in biology had been overturned 20 times.
Some of it, yeah. I mean, we know what lions eat everywhere in fine detail, pride structures, mortality, all those kinds of things have been looked at in different areas over and over again. Scent marking, no, we had one, Jeff Gilfillan, one of our PhD students, looked at some aspects of scent marking in lions, but not at the kind of unmanipulated biology. So in other words, no, the part of the problem is there's no way of detecting scent marking remotely.
Yes.
The current fashion is you stick a collar on an animal, it's got accelerometers in it, and you get satellite data and you run models and it tells you what the animal's doing when you're 10,000 miles away.
Yes.
You can't do that with scent marking. You have to do this grubby business of driving around following animals through the bush. And with nocturnal species, it's hugely difficult.
Yes.
But camera trapping has revolutionized the study of scent marking, because now what we can do, which was utterly impossible before, is if there's a scent mark, a natural scent mark, put a camera trap there, and you can see what comes. So we're studying the scent mark, not the animals. Before, what used to happen was the people would follow an animal. It would scent mark in a spot. They'd follow the animal off scent mark in another spot. Then, which we now know, and either another individual that researcher wasn't following comes along and scent marks over an individual of the same species, or even more intriguing, and something that we didn't know before we had camera trapping, is there's a huge amount of interspecific overmarking. To the extent that in our study area, in one study where we actually did go to the trouble of analysing all this data, is that interspecific scent marking is more common than intraspecific. Now, plainly, there is something going on there. And yes, my suspicion is this is what structures carnivore guilds, is what allows carnivores of different species to stay out of each other's way most of the time.
Yes.
But that's as far as it's got.
Interesting.
Now, I would have thought that people are interested in carnivore ecology and behavior, and especially if they're interested in the interactions between species, which for things like wild dogs, which are subordinate, ecologically subordinate, they get pushed out by large, high densities of hyenas and lions. This will be an area of huge interest, but nope, nothing going on. Really odd.
Well, I hope there's some PhD potential PhD students here who are listening, and they can.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Well, the number of PhDs, I could have a whole flock of them, but you know, we need the funding to feed and feed and water these PhDs, and give them the radio collars and the vehicles they need to actually do the work. But
yes,
and it's not only in Africa. I mean, in Asia, camera trapping has revealed huge levels of intraspecific scent marking involving Asian wolves, snow leopards, Pallas cat, and the local species of jackal. I mean, jackal are one of these kind of ubiquitous species which have got it's a super species, different, all scent marking over the same spots all the time.
Interesting.
Now, why would they bother to go to the same spot? There's plenty of rocks to pee on in the Himalayas. But no, they go and they pee over each other's scent marks, and there is some kind of interspecific communication going on there.
Interesting, yeah.
By this common language of chemical communication. And I mean, surely it must be hugely important. And if it's not important, it's still hugely interesting.
Interesting indeed, yeah. Goodness.
So yeah, I mean, a massive amount of work that could be done.
Yes.
Really fascinating stuff.
So 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't remember exactly how long ago. Actually, it was before COVID. My sister Amanda and I were invited to go to the Mammal Research Institute of Pretoria's, I think 70th anniversary, 50th, man.
Would have been 50th, yeah.
50th, yeah. So we went to Makani.
I think I was there.
Were you? Okay.
I think, this is now a long time ago, Jeremy.
It was at Mapani in Kruger Park. But one of the takeaways that I was left with was that mammal research is the takeaway, not necessarily the truth. That mammal research in South Africa, apart from marine mammals and some species like pangolins and some of the more a little bit more esoteric species, that it was all done. That there were no more PhD papers to be written about elephants or about leopards or about cheetahs, or and the whole premise of the conference is that where do we go from now?
Right. Was some new questions,
on mammal research, and they were talking about a lot of the things that you've been working on, the interaction between community and and elephants or predators,
Yeah.
climate change, those sorts of topics. But clearly there's a whole other level of mammalian chemistry that needs to be looked at.
Yes, oh, for sure. I mean, chemical communication is almost certainly, and for some species, without any shadow of a doubt, it is the most important channel of communication. And we tend to dismiss it because we're kind of vocal and visual animals ourselves. We're advanced monkeys, and the monkeys in general are less olfactorily orientated than things that run around on the ground. But yeah, for the huge majority of species, chemical communication is the most important. And back in the 70s or 80s, somebody actually said in so many words, if you don't understand olfactory communication, you don't understand mammals.
Yes.
And I think that's still true today. And our understanding of mammal chemical communication for the wild species hasn't actually advanced very much since the 1980s.
Yes.
It just dropped out of fashion. It was kind of pushed out by, first there was molecular genetics. That became the hot topic. So people were getting DNA samples from species all over the place. That was a hot topic. Then climate change came along. So everything was then related to climate change. And then it was big data and modeling. And olfaction is always it's the Cinderella science.
Yes.
Partly because it's mind-bogglingly difficult. But I think there's also a strong element that people see it as being, as the smells are, kind of ephemeral and woolly. You can't nail anything down. It's really difficult to convince people that smells are something real and they have real effects on animals' behavior.
So as a winemaker, smells are terribly important.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Now you think they're important to you. To a mammal,
well, I'm
way more important
to
other mammals, I should say, to the other ones, the wild mammals, not the tame ones. They are way, way more important. I think they are significant in everything. Food choice, which is equivalent to the wine, mate selection, individual recognition, social status, recent diet, disease, whole bunch of stuff. They can discriminate that by sniffing.
Yes.
And they don't need training. So this is not a trick that you train a sniffer dog to do.
Yeah.
Animals can do it instinctively.
It's in their
built
DNA.
in. Yeah. And it is a huge part of their social interactions.
We've got somebody coming into our thingy right now. Goodness gracious me!
Oh,
that's it. It's
somebody chatting. I'm not paying attention to the chat, so it's your job.
So Maria is actually fielding chats as we go on, because I actually can't chat and talk at the same time.
I can't either.
Peter, I think we should wrap it up.
Okay.
I think it's and it's been so fascinating. I hope that everybody that's still with us has enjoyed it as much as I have. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and for your this has been an incredibly fascinating talk. I mean, I've had some wonderful guests, but this has been one of the absolute highlights of my wine and wildlife discussions.
Great, thank you.
And please enjoy the wine that I sent you.
I will. For sure I will.
Grand. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the opportunity.
And good luck on the Wilderness Impact Challenge. I hope they make the right decision.
Yeah, well, I'm sure whatever decision they make will be right, but
well, there are some decisions that are righter than others.
Indeed, yeah. All decisions are right. Some are righter than others.
Indeed.
Yes. Okay. Well, no, fingers crossed.
Yes.
Let's hope,
Yes.
because it will make a huge difference. It
would,
will
yeah,
get
it would
over
be,
another hurdle.
yes, yes. I mean, you've come so far, and having, I think it's $100,000. Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
That's
Which
that's proper money.
That is a scale of funding that makes a difference. But at the same time, the fives and the tens, or even the
They
5
all
and
add up.
10,000, and that is also because that can kind of plug gaps,
Yes,
or it can allow me to do some little thing that this needs looking at to see if it's worth pursuing,
yes,
which
yes,
is very difficult
yes,
to build those into the big projects.
yes.
But
I mean,
if there's smaller donations come in, okay, so we can afford a new tire for the vehicle this month.
Well, indeed, everybody, you need tires. You need
Yeah,
your vehicles need to be serviced. Your
yeah,
staff needs to eat. Those
indeed.
things all come from small donations.
Yeah, yeah. And as I say, the smaller amounts do give us the flexibility to just, let's try this.
Yes,
Which is where the whole of the deterrence program came from.
yes.
Is one observation of one leopard doing a U-turn. And the whole of the deterrence, which is at the moment by far the most successful part of the whole BioBoundary, grew from that one video.
Yes.
So this is why you've got to be paying attention, and why I don't favor these big data number crunching approaches. You got to be actually taking notice of what the animals are doing.
Yes, yes. Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I hope you have a wonderful evening and good luck with the next couple of days.
Okay, yeah. Well, watch the internet. You'll probably know before I do. I'm not even sure they're going to tell me in advance or tell anybody in advance.
I'm quite sure they will do. I'm quite sure they'll put you on a pedestal
Who knows?
You'll have your 30 seconds of fame. Was it 2 minutes of fame, the Andy Warhol thing?
Yeah, can't even, wasn't it 9 minutes or something?
I think it was
anyway, whatever it was. Yeah,
well, you might have 9 minutes of fame.
You're starting to date us, Jeremy. Nobody else on this chat has ever even heard of Andy Warhol.
Well, I would hope they have, but anyway, it's a very different conversation.
Oh, good grief! Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
Cheers. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeremy. Stay well.
Right. Bye.